Peter Credlin, live from News24.
Good evening. Great to have your company. Parliament back this week. A whole lot on. Here's what's coming up tonight on Credlin. The latest polling's got Labor at its lowest point since Julia Gillard was dumped for Kevin Rudd Mark II. Albanese, once the working class hero, is now anything but, as One Nation continues to steal support from Labor. A new lobby group's been formed. It's called Fix Victoria, and they've entered the campaign race, and they arrived with a bang, launching a graphic new ad aimed at exposing Victoria's debt crisis. Well, I'll tell you who they are. I'll introduce you to them and play you the ad a little later tonight. Plus, Census Week, the big night tomorrow night, of course. Plenty of controversy still around questions of faith and what appears to be a concerted push to strengthen claims that Australia is giving up on religion. And Anthony Albanese back in damage control yet again over a woman yet again. This time, the Japanese ambassador warning him that his crude joke has damaged his standing in Japan.
Comments were beneath the office of Prime Minister. They were insulting, and the Prime Minister should make a personal apology.
As I said, the politicians are back in Canberra today. Parliament, of course, resuming tomorrow, making it an uncomfortable return for many. For Labor, it's yet another bad news poll in a horror stretch of bad polls, starting back before the May budget, sure, but really tanking since those tax changes were announced, which sent Australia's property market into freefall. Auction clearance rates, house value falls, banks reporting a massive drop-off in mortgage applications. Whatever measure you want to look at, it's catastrophic. With Labor's primary vote now at an incredibly low 29%, you'd have to go back to the dog days of the Gillard era to find a result that bad. Across almost every portfolio, ministerial performance for the Albanese government is subpar. Across almost every economic indicator, performance for the Albanese government is subpar, including confirmation that but for one other country, Australia is the worst in the OECD for business taxation. And we all know that personal income tax too is way too high. But beyond the real-world impacts on all of us as a result of bad policy out of Canberra is the intangible stuff buried deep in these numbers. By that I mean it's that in addition to the metrics that tell you whether government's doing a good or a bad job on things like GDP or employment data or inflation, it's whether governments are trusted on the intangibles like credibility, like competence and character. And this is where the Prime Minister and his government, minister after minister, with barely an exception, are hurting most. This is a government that should be unassailable in the polls, having just won another term 12 months ago and a record parliamentary majority. It should be untouchable, but it's not. Indeed, but for the splintering of the vote on the right, the big story right now would be that the Albanese government is in trouble, that voter remorse is now deep, it's consistent poll after poll, and it is worsening. But because the right's no longer a cohesive block of votes behind the official opposition, inevitably, the right becomes the story. Now, particularly the coalition. Partly, that's because, frankly, they deserve to be the story. A decade of weak Liberal leadership has left a shaken base, and while Angus Taylor is certainly saying all the right things and sure tougher than every one of his predecessors on from Turnbull, there is just not enough meat on the policy bones to make the coalition competitive. Take migration. The Liberals talk tough, but they still haven't given us a number. Now, 4 months ago, Home Affairs Shadow Minister John O'Donoghue said he was quitting the Parliament, but still no reshuffle to replace him and boost the firepower in one of the most critical portfolios this parliamentary term. Labor's bleeding on migration. Tony Burke was supposed to make those big announcements last week, but he was rolled in cabinet. We were then told they would come this week. Well, apparently that's not happening either, as division is mounting. It's next week now, we're told. So when your opponent's in trouble, this is where oppositions are supposed to lift. This is where the coalition should be well in front and playing to a home ground advantage, given its decades-long record on border protection. But sadly, that's not happening. Plenty of tough talk, as I said, plenty of rhetoric, but nowhere near enough concrete detail to cut through. And that's the problem. Policy limbo is what killed Peter Dutton. Policy ambiguity is what killed Susan Lee. Unless Taylor and Hume act fast and sort out the process constipation inside shadow cabinet and the whole policy process, it will kill them too. Again, between when he was first elected opposition leader in December 2009 and then when he faced that federal election in 2010, Abbott had 8 months only to work up policies and get across the detail. And that happened. We did it. I say we here because as well as being his chief of staff, I was also the secretary to shadow cabinet at the time. Now, in this opposition, that job's with a newish MP, Zoe McKenzie. So enough of the hand-wringing and excuses collectively, everyone out there in the coalition. If you've got a job to do, come on, get moving. Housing is another area where Labor is incredibly vulnerable. Yes, we all want a fair go for first home buyers. We don't want it to be any harder for them than it was for any of us. But we don't want it to be risky either, where people buy something that they can't afford or they have a loan that they can't service should circumstances change, as inevitably they will. Nor does anyone who has a home or paying off a home want their values to fall because governments put in place policies that are not thought through. But that's what's happening. Now, the really rich, they'll be okay. They're insulated from all of this. It's middle Australia who are getting hit and hit hard as Labor push on using the tax system as a method of wealth redistribution, socialism by stealth. A big part of the Albanese government's image problem is Albanese. He's gone from being the bloke with his face on a beer can to someone who seems addicted to the champagne high life. This is where Labor is losing people, because in the toss-up between Albanese and Pauline Hanson, it's the former fish and chip owner who's beating the Housing Commission kid hands down. Albanese is fast losing working class support, and he will struggle to get them back. Now, I'm not talking about the clowns and the Che Guevara or the Yes Voice T-shirts and the coloured hair down in Brunswick Street or Marrickville. I'm talking about mum and dad average out in the dormitory suburbs of our big cities. The people on fixed incomes, worried about their power bills. People worried about interest rate hikes, the rent, filling up the car. And rather than look like he's focused on them, Albanese is looking more and more out of touch. Like it's all gone to his head, that it's the trappings of the top job that matters most to him now, not the voters that put him there. Now, when was the last time you saw Albanese do a proper press conference? Did he answer those tough questions about the ISIS women and the ISIS men properly? Well, no, he didn't. Did he lie about not touching negative gearing and capital gains? Well, yes, he did. And instead of facing real scrutiny, he chooses to sit down with influencers and talks smut on a podcast. I mean, is this really where we are at? A man who likes to lecture others about how they should be respectful, making a jibe about Japan's first ever female Prime Minister and her gift to Australia during an official visit. This was, of course, the same infamous podcast where Albanese admitted to wanting to shag Kylie Minogue.
Shag, marry, date. Kylie Minogue?
Kylie, clearly.
You'd marry Kylie and shag her and date her?
All of the above.
I mean, if that wasn't bad enough for a newlywed bloke on his second marriage, it's the diplomatic fallout from his offensive talk about Japan's Prime Minister that's hurting him today, after Japan's former ambassador to Australia rightly called out Albanese's sexism. Now, this is how it played out today on Breakfast TV.
The Japanese Prime Minister brought a melon
How did he get that through customs?
It's a royal melon.
Oh, she smuggled. It was a she. Did she smuggle it?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm expecting.
Got a couple of melons.
She brought two.
She brought two, as you do.
She just came in looking like Pamela Anderson.
She brought two.
Yes, really.
And they're beautiful.
Tanya, the former ambassador has said this morning this was insulting, unthoughtful, and that the last thing the Japanese PM was expecting was, quote, to be so casually mocked by Australia's leader. Do you agree?
No, I completely disagree with that interpretation of what the Prime Minister was saying. I completely disagree that he was in any way making the suggestion that you're proposing or that the former ambassador is proposing now. No way.
Oh, come on, Tanya. When the bloke sits there on the couch and is doing this one with melons about a female, you know exactly what he's doing. You know, I know, and everyone watching it knows exactly what's going on here. I can't believe you would defend that smut. I mean, remember the outcry when Tony Abbott dared to look at his watch in the Parliament? After that morning blow-up, Albanese tried to then get away with a written statement on the incident, but sorry, mate, that's not good enough. It's absolutely weak.
I think that those comments have been roundly condemned. I mean, they were grubby, they were inappropriate. And if you offend a woman, you should apologise to that woman. You should apologise personally, not in a statement. I think that the Prime Minister owes the Prime Minister of Japan a personal apology.
Let's not forget Luke Gosling either, charged with assault. The PM says he won't be standing him down. Again, if Gosling was charged, imagine this, if he was charged with assaulting a woman rather than the Crown's male representative in the NT, what do you think the outcome would be there? I think we all know the answer to that. You either have standards or you don't. And too often under this Prime Minister, he won't admit error, he won't apologise, and instead digs in or just lies.
I stepped off the stage. I didn't fall over on my backside. I stumbled. That's what happened.
No wonder Albanese is such a close mate of Daniel Andrews, because that's who he now reminds me of. Peas in a pod. Two men out of Labor's left faction who love the trappings of office and Beijing in equal measure. Well, we know what happened to Dan Andrews, don't we? When you fall from grace, Prime Minister, you fall hard and you fall fast. All right, let's get the headlines now from Canberra. As I said, didn't have a question time today. They'll be back at it tomorrow, though. And joining us now with the headlines, political reporter Ruben Spargo.
Good evening. Pressure is mounting on the Albanese government as it prepares to reset Australia's migration settings. One Nation is accusing Labor of pursuing a secret plan to bring in 1 million migrants, pointing to the gap between the government's past projections and the outcomes. The opposition leader is also firing up.
Immigration too high and housing supply too low on Labor's own numbers. This is an absolute utter failure.
The Home Affairs Minister was expected to unveil Labor's migration reset last week. News24 understands an announcement this week appears unlikely at this stage. The Prime Minister and the opposition leader have met to discuss the news bargaining incentive. The model is designed to force big tech platforms to pay for news content. Labor is facing backlash from media companies after it proposed capping the levy as a percentage of digital advertising revenue rather than gross annual revenues. Gambling incentives are set to be restricted or banned in a bid to protect vulnerable Australians from themselves. The Coalition, Greens and Crossbench are calling on the government to strengthen its proposed reforms.
This will be the strongest anti-gambling legislation that Australia has ever seen.
Parliament returns tomorrow and the government aims to have the legislation passed within a fortnight.
All right, we had a bad poll today. All the major parties, this is news poll in The Australian, all major parties are down 1 point. Labor and One Nation locked at 29%, the Coalition on 18%. As I said, this is back to the dog days of Julia Gillard for Labor. Joining me now, our News24 political contributor, Chris Ullman. Chris, I've got an update on the Prime Minister and Japan. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's get through these polls. At 29 primary, I made the point at the top of the show, Labor's not long won an election. You know, they've got a record majority in the parliament. The coalition is at war with One Nation on the right. They should be unassailable, and they're not.
Well, that's right, Peter. We would never have thought that a political party could have won government from 33% of the vote, but the Labor Party did last time. Now it's fallen since then in the polls, but the catastrophic fall has been in the coalition. It's at 18%. That's Armageddon. So while it might be a concern to the Labor Party that its primary vote is so low, and I know it is a concern to the party that the primary vote is so low, it'll be laughing all the way to the bank in what's happened to the right-hand side of Australian politics, because at this stage the coalition looks completely unelectable for generations to come. We're seeing a reordering of politics on the right-hand side, which may take decades to unravel. So yes, while the Labor Party will be concerned, if I was anyone in the coalition at the moment, that would be where the real worry that this might be an end of times event should be.
Do you think we have too many polls? I feel like there's a poll every 5 minutes at the moment, and we're certainly in Victoria, fine, you know, elections in November, but nationally, we're 2 years out from an election.
I couldn't agree more, Peter. And the other thing too is if you look at that poll that you just showed me from the Australian, it has a margin of error of 3.4%. You could actually say that nothing's changed in the last 6 or 7 of those polls. Yet when you get a poll, you've got to write a headline about it. So you basically try to discern what a 1 percentage point shift means. When I was working at Channel 9, I tried as hard as I possibly could to stop our breakfast television program from constantly talking about every single poll which ever came out. But of course, they wanted to have something to talk about. It's measuring a mood. It's something real. We saw it in South Australia. We've seen it in Farah. The rise of One Nation is a thing, but we're not going to know what it means electorally until we see the next test, and that will come in November in Victoria. And my fear is that a new coat of paint on the Labor Party might just be enough, if the right-hand side of politics stays fractured, to get that government back. And I don't think even the people of Victoria want that.
And I will make the point, when we were in the Farah by-election and we're getting those polls out of Farah, they were deep polls. They were across a particular electorate. I think they're about as good as the party polls are, the published polls I'm talking about. But when you get an extrapolated poll from across the nation and you're only talking to 1,500 people and you're wanting to say that this will play out in that seat and that'll play out in that seat, I mean, I think they're very, very hard to take as you say, as anything more than just a mood.
People are unhappy, Peter, and the reason that they're unhappy is their living standards are falling and they can feel it. So that's a real thing. That's something that a government should worry about. But unfortunately, what we need for the government to worry about is the fact that it might lose government. And at the moment, we've lost that possibility. You know, I think that the Labor Party believes, quite rightly, that it can now lump the coalition and One Nation together and paint the worst parts of it as the thing that Australians need to worry about. And in the end, it will come down to a choice as who is fit to govern at the next election. And if the coalition looks like it cannot muster itself to be a credible government, then the only answer will be the Labor Party.
I made the point in my editorial that the Prime Minister is a big drag on his own vote. And I think that whole Mellon's rubbish, and look, even just talking to a low-rent sort of podcaster, it wasn't the only bit of smut in the podcast. There was a whole barrage of it we saw with Kylie Minogue. But there's an exclusive on the Australian's website right now that the Japanese government, the Prime Minister, in fact, has formally raised that incident with our Prime Minister. This idea that it doesn't matter, this idea that Tokyo doesn't care, well, anyone cares. Any woman would care about that, let alone a Prime Minister.
Well, we've lacked seriousness on Japan for some time now, and they've felt it. There are a series of things, and you were talking about Shingo Yamagami, who is probably the best ambassador this country has ever had. He started by raising what had happened to coal exports in Queensland, and of course the royalties regime, which was changed abruptly by the ALP up there. That hurt the Japanese. They're worried about us not being a guaranteed supplier of energy, which they absolutely need. Then we start looking at gas taxes. They're worried about that. Then we see this ridiculous comment by the Prime Minister of Australia, which, by the way, if that had been Scott Morrison, Peter Dutton, you name it, anyone in the coalition, don't you think there would have been a procession every day afterwards of every female member of the Labor Party that came out and demanded an apology, plus every single commissioner that we have in the country which deals with issues to do with women? You know, don't give me this balderdash that this wasn't a serious issue. It was. But beyond that too, the Prime Minister then decided that he wouldn't attend a treaty event in Parliament House about the NARA Treaty, which is 50 years old, but would prefer to go to a Spotify event in Parliament on the same night. You add these things up, and this government is not serious about Japan, and it keeps talking about middle powers getting together. There is no more important middle power to Australia than Japan, and we are treating this relationship with contempt.
That is because, mate, you and I both know he is completely orientated. Labor is completely orientated to Beijing.
Absolutely, and you can make no other decision to this. We are downplaying the Japanese relationship because we're concerned about how it is received in Beijing, and of course, the Prime Minister of Japan is hated by Beijing because she is being very strong indeed in North Asia. So it is a really important relationship, and we are squandering it. And by the way, this will come to home to roost in terms of our exports. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, is extremely keen to get those exports which we now have over gas and take them for Canada. And those contracts will come up in the next few years. So we will lose market share to Canada if we aren't careful with this relationship with Japan. It's time for the Prime Minister to be serious about the Japanese relationship and do something real to mend relationships.
You shock me, the great climate warrior Carney, mugged by the reality of a balance sheet and running a country, will happily take dirty old fossil fuels if he can get them. Just quickly, Josh Frydenberg, that news overnight that he has certainly put in a submission to the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism, but he is not being asked now to formally attend and give evidence. What do you make of this?
Well, why wouldn't he be heard? He is a serious and powerful voice inside the Jewish community. He has enormous experience in politics in Australia, and we're hearing from a whole lot of other people. So why wouldn't you want to hear from Josh Frydenberg? It makes no sense to me, but then again, I've got to say, Peter, when I look around Australia after having come back from Europe, nothing much makes any sense to me. I can tell you the two stories which cut through in the UK when I was there. That was the Prime Minister talking about wanting to shag Kylie Minogue and Barnaby Joyce yelling at his dog. We look like trivial country and we're behaving like a trivial country.
And a lot of our economic indicators are going that way too. I'll leave it there, Chris Yeoman. Thank you. Let's go now to that new campaign force set to shake up things in the Victorian election. It's called Fix Victoria, and it's demanding policies from politicians to do just that. And just to make sure they sort of kick off with a bit of a bang, here's their first ad, which hit the airwaves overnight.
Victoria's tsunami of debt, waste, corruption and overspending is $229 billion and rising. It's destroying businesses, jobs, stealing resources from our schools, hospitals and police. Without a plan to clean up and pay back the debt, it will smash all we've built. And who'll have to pay? Our children. Join us to Fix Victoria.
Authorised by D. Henderson for Fix Victoria Incorporated, Melbourne.
All right, that ad, I'm told, is the first of many for a body that was just launched a couple of weeks ago. So who is Fix Victoria? Well, joining me now, their head of advocacy, Gideon Rosner, who you'll remember from the IPA. You were a big hit on my show previously, so I'm glad to see you back.
It's great to be back, Peter.
OK, so to tell us about Fix Victoria. Are they a political party? Will we see candidates? What's going on?
No, we're not a political party. We're an independent advocacy organisation. We're going to be standing up for the thousands upon thousands of Victorians who, as you well know, Peter, who are despairing, absolutely despairing over the state of Victoria and what it's going through and what it's gone through for some time. You know, until now, I've been in the private sector for the last few years, Peter.
Yes, you have.
I have been, and you know, I loved it, but there was an acronym going around investment circles a lot of your viewers may have heard, which is ABM. anywhere but Melbourne. Now, that's not a political line. That's the free market effectively saying investing in Victoria the way it is currently being run is not worth the risk. Now, that is not acceptable to me, and it shouldn't be acceptable to you or anybody else, because I'm a 90s kid. I remember when this state was at its absolute peak. I remember when it was on the up. I remember when we were the envy of this country, not a national punchline like we are now. So Fix Victoria is for any Victorian, no matter which party you've supported in the past, no matter where you come from, anybody who is concerned as we are about the terrible mess Victoria is in, we are for you.
You're talking about the late 90s when the government had changed. I was there in the early 90s
after 92.
Under Kane and Colonel. It was pretty shocking. So what do you want to achieve? Is it about a policy debate? Are you going to hold all the parties to account? Are you pushing a particular barrow?
Well, firstly, you're absolutely right. We are holding all the parties to account. We are not working with any party, but we will work with any party, any politician, any public figure with a serious plan to do something about the terrible problems Victoria has, whether it be the debt crisis, whether it be the fact that crime is at the highest record since levels began. And, you know, Victorians are smart as well. Our research shows that 2/3 of Victorians know that this state is on the wrong track, right? They know that we're paying $24 million a day on interest. That's just to service the debt. That's not the principle.
And it's borrowed money.
It's borrowed money. And Victorians know you can't pay the mortgage off with a credit card. And they're seeing now what happens when that money runs out. We saw just today 40-odd cars damaged with a single pothole in Victoria. That crumbling infrastructure is what happens when the state goes broke. But, you know, it doesn't have to be this way, Peter. As I said, I remember when times were different. We can get there again. There is nothing that has been done to the state of Victoria for the last few years that can't be undone with the right decisions and the right policies. So our job is to, as you said, spark that debate, make sure that the tsunami of debt is on everybody's mind going forward, and hopefully do something about it.
OK, so to increase your firepower, I want to get you on here a bit, so let's make that happen. How can people support you? How can they find out more about you?
Well, to sign up, just go to fixvictoria.com.au. As I said, we are open to everybody, anybody who is concerned about the direction of our state. Please, please, please go and join the organisation, because we need all the help we can get against the other voices in the debate, whether it be unions, NGOs, whoever it else. We need to even up the ledger and make sure that ordinary, everyday Victorians are counted too.
Good on you. Good to see you back
Thanks,
in the saddle.
Peta.
Isn't that great? We need a bit of a fight and some firepower in Victoria. He's right about the unions too. They're going to come there and support Ben Carroll. Right after the break, alarming data released today. Around 300 would-be terrorists are currently in these de-radicalisation programs. You know my view on them. I'm not so sure they work. We'll get into it, but I want to know who runs them as well. And as the first soldier faced a war crimes charge in court today, why did the Senate vote last week to block the release of the report into the conduct of the officers and the chain of command? Credlin regular David Craig coming up. Welcome back. How the upcoming census can skew the way religion's represented in Australia. That's coming up. And why some are campaigning for a no religion vote. But first, in data confirmed now by the Home Affairs Department, there are now just shy of 300 would-be terrorists in Australia in de-radicalisation programs. That number having jumped some 20% since Bondi. Now, shockingly, 92% are male, the rest are female. This is the worrying one. You've got 30% aged 17 or younger, 26% between 18 and 24, 32% between 25 and 45 years of age, and 12% only over the age of 45. So put some of those numbers together and you've got 56% of these would-be terrorists under the age of 25. Joining me now, former AFP Detective Superintendent David Craig. Thank you, David. We keep coming back to the issue of these DRAD programs because I want people to understand, given ASIO doesn't have and will never have the resources, nor will the AFP, to watch everybody of concern. We are putting a lot of eggs into the programs, the basket of these programs, to turn off terrorist ideologies or interest from these young people, particularly these young men. So I want to know more about them. I want to know they work. But when I hear that these numbers are growing as they are, I'm worried.
I think you should be. I mean, there's two aspects. The positive aspect is I think that perhaps the figures indicate that since Bondi, there's been like an 18% increase in referrals to de-radicalisation. That's a good thing because at least people are referring people for de-radicalisation. Not that I'm a fan of de-radicalisation, but that brings me to my next point. The negative point is these programs are funded and coordinated federally, but they're administered through the states and territories through disparate organisations and people from police, corrections, psychologists, community leaders, mentors. Is all that data being captured and fed back to Home Affairs so we can get accurate data so that we can intervene early with these sorts of problems?
Well, I don't think it is, David. I mean, I know my way around research at a federal level, and I've tracked the money. There's hundreds of millions of dollars leaving Canberra. It's paid to the states, as rightly you say. Some states run the programs through government auspices. Others look like to me that they're giving money to sort of imams, councils or Muslim organisations, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of audit, if I could call it that, audit of efficacy. Are they working these programs? Are we confident that people are not I'm trying to think of the word, that they haven't actually committed any crime yet, they're being watched, but are they finishing a program and then being thrown back into a program because they haven't been de-radicalised? I mean, you can't find the data. There's no annual report that I can find. I look through the estimates questions, David, and the responses by the department at Senate estimates. They're very poor, they're opaque. It's like they're pushing the money out there as this is the big answer, but they're keeping the audit, if it's even happening, a secret.
Yeah, look, I think politically it solves everything because it makes people feel great. Oh, good, this person's been sent off to a de-radicalisation program. But I can tell you that most of them are ineffective. Studies have shown that. They're an important measure. I'm not saying we should drop them. They definitely need to be a part. They're more useful, and this demographic is good with over 50% under 25 years of age. De-radicalisation programs are most effective with younger people. So that's a positive thing. But we're not seeing the data recorded. We're not seeing the reports. And I just think that politically we just hand all this money out and we can say they're in de-radicalisation, and that creates a real false sense of belief in the community that everything's being taken care of, whereas it's far not from that. There's real issues with ASIO, the AFP, in Home Affairs itself, dreadful issues that we're not confronting, issues that we should be.
Let's go to that report in The Australian today that Home Affairs have given hundreds of thousands of dollars to a whole lot of small-time media outlets. It's all under the umbrella of supporting journalism in multicultural communities. Well, you dig into it and you find that there's $500,000 that's been given to three companies in particular: OPN Media Limited, Sina Incorporated, which publishes the Australasian Muslim Times, and an outfit called 1620 Proprietary Limited, which runs Radio Tomorrow, accused of promoting an Islamic preacher who's been banned from at least 2 European countries for propagating anti-Semitic tropes. What the heck's going on here?
Look, it's. Well, I mean, we really need to confront this head on, I think, Peter. And it's two of these media outlets identify themselves as Muslim outlets, and the other one is Arabic. Now, if these people are meant to be providing multicultural advice and helping social cohesion, and they've been accused of anti-Semitic voices, supporting Hezbollah and Hamas. So we've got one edge of the government saying we need to be fixing this, and the Royal Commission right now is questioning exactly this. And our government hasn't shown due diligence towards who they're giving $500,000 to, when the demographic of that background, and most terrorism in Australia we know comes from the Middle East. It's mostly from the Middle East. It's not all Middle Eastern people, but that's an area that is a keen edge. If we can get them educating the public properly, it will vastly help the radicalisation of youth in those communities. So I think that it's an appropriate thing to do, to ask for due diligence and accountability when they're handing out money to these community organisations.
David, I'm really up against the clock. I've got to ask you, are you concerned, as I am, that this report in relation to the command structures, the senior officers here, in relation to what happened in Afghanistan or is alleged to have occurred in Afghanistan, was blocked from being released on the weekend, on Friday by the Senate? I guess, yes, of course, there'll be classified material in there, but can't we clean that up and let the report come out into the public domain?
I think it has to come out, Peter, because the way it looks at the moment is that the grassroots operators, the operators at the front line, have had extreme scrutiny and they've been subject to that. We need to see, the Australian community needs to see that the same has been applied to the upper ranks and to find out if they've been reckless or whether they've been diligent in their administration of the staff accused of war crimes.
Yeah, because the claim is certainly that there is a cover-up of the very highest ranks there in the military, and this does not help that argument. I'll leave it there. Thank you, David. All right, after the break, new research has revealed how census questions on religion could be deliberately misleading in an underhanded political campaign to suggest that Australia is increasingly secular. After the break. Welcome back. Outrage in Melbourne yesterday. People marching in the street regarding tougher bail conditions after the horrific death of a shopkeeper just the other day. Now to this week's census, of course. Tomorrow night is census night, and fresh questions over what the numbers are really telling us about religion in Australia. New research by Compass Polling suggests the way the census religion questions worded can have a material impact on how Australians respond, potentially meaning the proportion of Australians with no religion has been significantly overstated. Dr. Dorian van Freehold is the Managing Director of Compass Polling and joins me now. Dorian, welcome to the program. This is a vexed turf for us to be on, because I noted from comments I made last week in relation to the Christian religion and the Jewish religion, there was a firestorm online. I got some detail wrong. I'd indicated that the Jews used to have a box on the 2021 census. They never have, which shocks me in itself. They have to tick the other box. They have to write in their faith. But I tell you what, the people in the no religion camp have come for me online. Your research involved more than 5,000 Australians, and you looked at 4 different versions of the questions about religion used in the census. What did you find?
Yes, great to be here tonight, Peter. Ostensibly, the key finding is that the number of people who fall into that no religion category in Australia should be far closer to 26% than 39% as per the last census. This was widely reported in the ABC and the Australian last week. How did we get there? As you mentioned, Peter, we conducted a rigorous piece of research, 5,012 participants, and essentially they were assigned to one of the 4, randomly assigned to one of the 4 census question formats. It's changed 4 times in the past. And broadly, we found that the percentage of people who responded no religion ranged from 20% to 47%, depending just on the question. So the question itself is significantly responsible for how people respond and what percentage of people actually select no religion.
So you're saying, and I know this from political polling, how you ask the question can skew the result. The ABS will tell you that they're independent. What's different about the questions that drives that high no religion vote?
Yep. So the current census framing is somewhat peculiar in that it's a checkbox question where the first option is no religion. Now, being a guy with a PhD in consumer psychology, having lectured many a course on research methodologies, that's a rookie error. You fall straight into what's called the primacy effect, which means that the first option visible to respondents gets a disproportionate amount of eyeballs and is more likely to be selected.
Dorian, can I just jump in there? It's like the donkey vote in politics. People love to be on the top of the ballot paper. But the ABS, when asked about that, say the only reason no religion's up the top is because they take the number one response from the old census and put it up the top of this census.
Yeah, that's a somewhat peculiar way to look at it. I mean, it's well studied and documented in psychology literature that will distort the results significantly. The ABS also acknowledge openly that the changes, the quadruple changes in the question, may change people's responses, but they never did the legwork to actually figure out and quantify how great those changes are. So that's a major shortcoming for an exercise which this year is going to cost us $722 million, coming to think of it, $750 million. That sort of academic rigour is really necessary. We need to quantify how these changes are going to distort how people respond to the result. And you can see in the research that the distortion, the manipulation here is a very major one.
And why isn't there, Dorian, just a box on Christian? Because if you're looking on that list and you don't see your church or a church you identify with, you think, well, okay, maybe I don't fit there, and you may tick the no religion. Or if you're not a churchgoer, you may think you're not entitled to tick a church box. But there isn't an option, unless you write it in yourself, to just call yourself a Christian.
Correct. Which brings us right back to the original framing of the census question, which was an open-ended question. And that was the least distorted question you can possibly have. People just wrote in what their religion was, and then the analysis was conducted afterwards. And that's a very powerful way to do it, and with AI these days can very easily be classified.
And just before we go, so are you saying that on the basis of your research, Australians aren't becoming more secular as some would claim?
Correct. I mean, secularisation in Australia is real, but the speedometer is broken here. And broadly, my comment would be that, we're paying as taxpayers a lot of money for this speedometer. And if I was the guy buying it, it should be a robust, solid instrument that doesn't jump around all the time.
Very well explained. I know it's dense research stuff, but you've done a very good job tonight. Dr. Dorian von Freehold, thank you for your time. There you go. If you're filling it out tomorrow and you've got even a passing faith still left in you, please tick a faith box or write it in. After the break, livelihoods and lives on the line in Melbourne. Hundreds gathered yesterday to pay their respects to a Good Samaritan shopkeeper tragically killed last week. And this international student visa stuff that's come out over the weekend. Non-student family members allowed here in Australia. After the break. Welcome back now to heartbreaking scenes out of Melbourne yesterday, where crowds, hundreds of people gathered to demand tougher laws and more police patrols following the death of a shopkeeper who was allegedly attacked by teenagers when he rushed to the aid of a fellow retail worker last week.
The rain didn't dampen their burning rage, with hundreds gathering to protest in sunshine.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
As chants rang out on the other side of Hampshire Road, a vigil.
To pay respect to the man who have sacrificed his life for his fellow human beings. And like all heroes, we don't know them until their acts of heroism.
Now, horrifically, a 15-year-old boy has been charged with manslaughter. A 12-year-old boy, two 14-year-old girls have been also charged with intentionally causing serious injury and a fray, but it's Victoria, so they have been released on bail. Joining me now to discuss this and other issues as well, former Liberal MP Nicole Flint, One Nation Party Director, there's the new title, James Ashby. Welcome to you both. Nicole, at what point do Victorians wake up and say enough is enough?
What an absolutely sickening and heartbreaking series of events, Peter. And it just goes to show that right now, Australia is a country and a culture of no consequences. And Victoria is at the epicentre of this because for years now, we have seen home invasions and car thefts and petty crime running rife in Victoria with no consequences. So is it any surprise that we are now seeing the most tragic of human consequences, which is someone allegedly murdered, and the alleged perpetrators let out on bail? Enough is enough. Victorians have a very clear choice at the upcoming election, but so does every single Australian. This is why people are really angry at the moment. They're sick of seeing no consequences for this sort of barbaric behaviour.
Let's go to this story, James, on the weekend in the Sunday Telegraph. I read it and I had to read it 3 or 4 times over. So if you come to Australia on a student visa, it's supposed to be temporary. You're supposed to do your course and go home. Sometimes you might get a job at the end, but a lot of people stay here and they move across visas to string out the time they're here. Now, we have them for vocational, we have them for undergrad, we also have them for graduates. But what shocked me is that you can bring your extended family, beg your pardon, your immediate family with you as well. So you come as the student, but your family can come as well and they get whatever work rights you have. So of the people on the graduate visa class, 271,000 are in Australia right now. Almost 74% of people on that visa class are not the graduate students, they're the family of them. So 74,000, that's 30%, James. What's going on here? We're selling... Oh, he's lost audio. Nicole, I'll come to you on that one. Nicole, we are selling a visa outcome here. We are not selling education.
Peter, it's absolutely extraordinary. And again, no wonder Australians are fed up because the other question here is, are these family members even working? You know, are they contributing? Are they making making a contribution to the workforce? We've got record skill shortages across the board because I understand it's not just partners, but it's also children. So obviously children are not necessarily working, but are they then in our schools? Are they also using our health system? We've got record pressures across the board at every single level. And so, again, no wonder people are rightly asking questions about the migration system. Who's coming here and what are they doing? And are they helping Australia get ahead or are they actually draining really precious resources that we need at the moment when we're at a record cost of living crisis and when services, whether it's public transport, health, education, are under pressure?
Okay, I'll bring you in, James, because we've got your connection going there. But are you surprised by this? Because I was not aware of the scale of basically family members coming in, backdoor coming in with a family member on a student visa.
Well, it concerns me when governments and parties alike say that education is our 5th biggest export: coal, gas, iron ore, gold, and then education. The problem is, with an export, you send things out of the country. Problem is, we're bringing them in and we're not sending them back at all. So this whole idea of it being an export is, again, part of the Ponzi scheme. And the only winners out of this are the universities. They've got salespeople in other countries, mainly China and India, selling their wares. But as part of that, you don't just get the education. They're saying you get to stay for the long haul as well, plus bring your family down with you. And when you're talking about 74,000 people then being allowed to stay in the country with no skills whatsoever, it defies the logic that's being explained by this Labor government that they're only bringing skilled people into Australia. It's a lie, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's just propping up these greedy universities, and Australians have been played for mugs.
I've got to ask you, James, we talked a moment ago about the horrific events in Melbourne last week in relation to the shopkeeper who died at the hands, allegedly, of young kids. But you've got this proposal in Victoria at the moment for people who run our courts, and there's a huge backlog in Victoria, to work from home. How can you work from home if you're supposed to be working in the court?
And especially given that there's a 30% uplift in people that are self-representing. They need help at those desks when they go into the court. There's big problems in our court system. Working from home is not a logical stance that the Victorian government should be taking.
It's a shocker. I'll leave it there. Thank you to you both. Good to have you there in your new role, James. You haven't disappeared. Great to see you too, Nicole. I'll see you all tomorrow. There will be question time, of course. We'll see how much pressure the Prime Minister comes on after, of course, we heard tonight. The Japanese Prime Minister has raised that whole smutty podcast with him directly. I'll leave it there. Here's Andrew.